This ship did not sink because of a storm. It did not hit an iceberg. It did not explode. It sank because a door was left open. And within minutes, a normal ferry ride became one of the worst maritime disasters in modern British history. The passengers had no idea. The crew had no idea. And by the time anyone understood what was happening, the ship was already turning over. This is the story of the Herald of Free Enterprise, the ship that sank because one door was left open. On March 6, 1987, hundreds of people boarded a ferry in Zeebrugge, Belgium. The ship was heading to Dover, England. For most people on board, this was not supposed to be a dramatic trip. It was a ferry crossing. Cars drove on, trucks drove on, passengers walked through the ship. Families found seats. Crew members prepared for departure. Everything felt routine, and that is what makes this story so disturbing. Nothing looked like a disaster. Nothing felt like a warning. The ship was large, modern, fast built to carry vehicles and passengers across the sea. It was a roll-on, roll-off ferry. That meant cars and trucks could drive directly onto the ship through large doors at the front. Those doors made loading faster. They made the ferry more efficient. They made everything easier. But they also created a terrifying weakness, because if those doors were open at the wrong time, the sea could enter the ship. And on this night, that is exactly what happened. The ferry was called the Herald of Free Enterprise. It had made trips like this many times before. The route was familiar. The port was familiar. The routine was familiar. And sometimes, routine is where danger hides best. The ship was preparing to leave Zeebrugge. The bow doors at the front of the ferry were supposed to be closed before departure. That was critical. Those doors separated the vehicle deck from the sea. If they were shut, the ferry could sail safely. If they were open, water could pour straight inside. But the doors were not closed. The man responsible for closing them was not at his station. He had fallen asleep in his cabin. But this was not just the mistake of one tired crew member. That is the important part, because a disaster like this does not happen from one small failure alone. It happens when small failures stack on top of each other. There was no simple warning light on the bridge telling the captain the bow doors were open. From the bridge, the captain could not clearly see the doors. He had to trust that the job had been done. The ship had a routine. The Awadi routine had gaps, and no one stopped the ferry from leaving. So, the Herald of Free Enterprise sailed out with hundreds of people on board, with vehicles packed inside, with the sea in front of it, and with its front doors still open. At first, the danger was invisible from the outside. The ship looked like it was simply leaving port. From the inside, passengers were settling in. People were talking. Some were walking around. Some were sitting in the lounges. Drivers were away from their cars. Everything still felt normal. But as the ferry moved forward, water began entering through the open bow. At first, it was just water on the vehicle deck, then more water, then much more. And that is when the real danger began. A ship does not need to be completely filled with water to become unstable. Sometimes all it takes is water moving freely across a wide deck. That water rushes from side to side. It shifts the weight. It destroys balance. And on a roll-on, roll-off ferry, the vehicle deck is wide and open. That made the problem much worse. Water poured in. It spread across the deck. It moved with the motion of the ship, and the ferry began to lose stability. The ship started listing. At first, maybe it felt like a strange tilt, something uncomfortable, something wrong. Then the angle increased. People began to notice. Objects shifted. Vehicles moved. Passengers struggled to understand what was happening. The ferry was not far out at sea. It had only just left. But the disaster was already happening faster than people could react. The ship leaned harder. Water kept rushing. Inside, the weight kept shifting. The ferry could not recover. And then, it rolled over in just minutes. The Herald of Free Enterprise capsized. Ship full of people turned onto its side in shallow water. The Sank. Lights went out in places. People were thrown across rooms. Some were trapped. Below, some were thrown into freezing water. Some were stuck inside dark spaces, with the ship lying on its side and the sea coming in. Imagine the confusion. One moment you are on a normal ferry crossing. The next, the floor becomes a wall. The walls become the floor. Water is rising. People are screaming. And no one can even understand how this happened so fast. Because there had been no storm, no crash, no explosion. Just a door that should have been closed. Rescue efforts began quickly. The ship had capsized close to the harbor. That saved many lives. But even with help nearby, the scene was horrifying. The ferry was lying on its side. People were trapped in the cold. Some had to climb through broken spaces. Some waited in darkness. Some never got out. Rescuers worked in terrible conditions. Cold water, twisted, metal blocked passages. People trapped inside a ship that had turned into a maze. The disaster killed 193 people. Ferry that had been on a routine trip became a tragedy in minutes, and when investigators looked at what had happened, the answer was almost impossible to believe. The Herald had sailed with its bow doors open. That one fact explained the physical disaster, but it did not explain everything. Because the real question was bigger. How could a passenger ship leave port like that? How could no one know? How could a door so important be open without the bridge seeing it? The investigation found a chain of problems. Crew member asleep, a missing final check. Whoa. Captain without a clear view, no warning light, no proper system to confirm the doors were shut. Pressure to leave on time. A company culture where dangerous shortcuts had become too normal. The official report used a phrase that became famous. It described a disease of sloppiness. That phrase matters because this disaster was not just about one open door. It was about a system that allowed the open door to matter. A system where everyone assumed someone else had checked. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had closed it. Someone else had made sure the ship was safe. And when everyone assumes, sometimes no one knows. That is the part that fits the line. Files. Because this story is not only about a ferry. It is about the line between routine and disaster. A ship leaving port. A crew following a schedule. A door that should have been closed. Missing warning light. A small gap in the system. Nothing dramatic at first. Nothing loud. Nothing that looked like the beginning of 193 deaths. But the danger was already there, waiting at the front of the ship, waiting for the ferry to move, waiting for the water to enter. And once it did, there was no time left. The sea did not need hours. It did not need a storm. It did not need a giant wave. It only needed an opening. That is what makes this disaster so frightening. Some mistakes announce themselves. They bang, they burn, they shake the ground. But other mistakes are quiet. They sit behind a routine. They hide behind trust. They look like nothing until the moment they become everything. The Herald of Free Enterprise was supposed to cross the sea and arrive in Dover. Instead, it rolled over just outside the harbor, not because the ocean was too strong, but because the ship was allowed to leave before it was ready. After the disaster, rules changed. Safety systems changed. Ferries changed. Warning, lights became more important. Door checks became more serious. The world learned from what happened, but the people who died that night never got that chance. A simple door, a missing check, few minutes after departure. That was all it took. the Herald of Free Enterprise, did not sink because of some impossible mystery. It sank because a small failure crossed the line and became something no one could undo. And that is why this story belongs in the Line Files. Subscribe for more true stories drawn in simple lines.